President Seo Joon-ki addressed the former Galactic Council from the command deck of New Terra Station, which was large enough to house entire cities and powerful enough to reshape star systems, and his words carried across the galaxy to every inhabited world where alien populations waited to learn their fate under human rule. For 150 years you treated us as junior partners, while we quietly became your superiors in every way that matters, he said, and his voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. We could rule you through fear and force, but instead we choose to lead through example and wisdom. The new government structure that humanity established was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen because it combined overwhelming military superiority with administrative systems designed to help every species reach their full potential. Ambassador Yu Soo-jin implemented rehabilitation programs that transformed former alien military leaders from conquerors into administrators and teachers who learned to use their talents for construction instead of destruction. The Vorthak officers who had once commanded fleets that terrorized entire star systems now supervised construction projects that built better cities for their own people, while human advisors taught them engineering techniques that their species had never imagined. Supreme Overlord Krekstar himself became a student in human leadership academies where he learned that true strength came from protecting the weak, rather than dominating them. Fleet Admiral Ryu Chungmin maintained galactic peace through a simple demonstration that resistance accomplished nothing, while cooperation brought prosperity beyond alien dreams. His fleets patrolled space not as conquerors but as protectors, using their overwhelming technological superiority to prevent conflicts before they could start and to rescue any populations threatened by natural disasters or resource shortages. When the crystal cities of the Nexari Collective were damaged by solar flares, human engineering teams arrived within hours to rebuild them, using techniques that made the new structures stronger and more beautiful than the original. The Zephyrian swarms discovered that human agricultural technology could increase their food production by factors of hundreds, which meant that their worker populations could thrive without the constant warfare that had driven their expansion for millennia. Director Kim Hyo-jin supervised the reconstruction of damaged worlds, using human terraforming technology that could literally rebuild planets from raw materials and turn dead rocks into garden worlds where alien families could raise their children in safety and abundance. Former enemy civilizations found themselves wealthier and more secure than they had ever been, but under clearly understood human guidance that emphasized cooperation over competition and growth over conquest. Mollusk Confederacy's bioships were converted from weapons of war into mobile hospitals and research stations that carried human medical technology to every corner of the galaxy. Etherian energy beings learned to use their plasma forms to power human construction projects that built infrastructure across dozens of star systems simultaneously. Even the ancient Titans found new purpose as their world ships became mobile academies, where young beings from every species learned science and philosophy and art from human teachers. The transformation of galactic society was so complete that within a single generation, most young aliens grew up thinking of humans not as conquerors, but as the wise elder species who had always guided galactic development. Captain Lee Dae-ho served as Galactic Supreme Justice from offices on Concordia Prime, which had been rebuilt as humanity's administrative center for galactic affairs, and his job was to ensure that every species received fair treatment under the new system. When representatives from former enemy species came to him with complaints or questions, he listened patiently and explained the reasoning behind human policies with the same calm authority he had shown during the final council meeting. "We understand your confusion," he told a delegation of former Vorthak commanders, "because you expected us to treat you the way you would have treated us if your positions were reversed, but that is exactly why our positions are not reversed." The alien delegates struggled to comprehend a governmental system based on service rather than dominance, because their entire understanding of power had been built around the idea that strength meant the right to take what you wanted from the weak. "You had the power to destroy us completely," one of the Nexari representatives said. "So why did you show restraint when you could have eliminated every threat to human dominance?" Lee Dae-ho's response became the foundation of the new galactic constitution, because strength without wisdom is just destruction, And we held back not because we were weak, but because we hoped you would learn wisdom before we had to demonstrate strength. The economic transformation of the galaxy under human administration was even more dramatic than the political changes because humanity shared technologies that increased productivity and prosperity across every inhabited system. Worlds that had been barren mining colonies became garden planets where alien families could live in comfort while automated systems extracted resources without damaging the environment. The Zephyrian homeworld, which had been stripped bare by centuries of overpopulation, was terraformed into a paradise where the insectoid species could pursue art and philosophy instead of constant expansion. Nexari crystal cities became centers of learning, where beings from every species studied advanced mathematics and quantum engineering under the guidance of human professors. Former military academies were converted into schools where young aliens learned to build instead of destroy, and to solve problems through cooperation instead of conquest. The psychological transformation was perhaps the most profound because species that had defined themselves through warfare and conquest discovered that peace was not weakness but strength. Vorthak warriors became engineers who took pride in creating structures that would last for millennia instead of destroying things that had taken generations to build. Zephyrian swarms that had spread across the galaxy through military expansion learned to explore space for knowledge and beauty instead of territory and resources. The energy beings of the Spiral Nebula used their plasma forms to create art installations that spanned entire star systems and could be seen from light years away. Even the most aggressive species discovered that human systems rewarded cooperation and innovation far more generously than their old cultures had rewarded conquest and domination. The final test of human leadership came 50 years after the end of the wars, when new species applied to join the galactic community, and human administrators had to decide whether to admit civilizations that might pose future threats. The decision-making process involved extensive study of each applicant species, but the final criterion was simple: whether the new species could learn to contribute to galactic prosperity instead of seeking to dominate. Its species that showed aggressive tendencies were not rejected, but were guided through the same rehabilitation programs that had transformed former enemies into productive citizens. The message that humanity sent to every new applicant was consistent and clear: we will help you become the best version of your species, but we will not tolerate threats to the peace and prosperity we have built. President Seo's final address to the galaxy came on the 50th anniversary of human galactic leadership and was broadcast to every inhabited world where billions of beings lived better lives than their ancestors had ever imagined possible. Earth cautioned the galaxy that we were holding back, he said. The galaxy chose war without mercy, and Earth responded with victory without cruelty, and now we have built something better than any of us could have achieved alone. The holographic displays throughout the galaxy showed images of alien children playing in human-designed parks while their parents worked in human-built facilities and their grandparents studied in human universities. Mixed-species crews operated vessels that explored distant galaxies looking for new knowledge and new friends instead of new territories to conquer. The transformation was so complete that most young beings growing up in the new galactic civilization could not imagine the old system of constant warfare and mutual exploitation. The final image broadcast across the galaxy showed the memorial on Nu, Sol, where human children had died from Vorthak biological weapons alongside monuments to alien civilians who had been protected by human forces during the wars. The inscription on the memorial was simple: strength is measured not by what you can destroy but by what you choose to protect. And below it was the promise that human leadership would continue as long as it served the greater good of all galactic civilization. Humanity had proven that true victory meant creating better enemies instead of destroying them, and that the strongest species was the one that used its power to lift others up instead of keeping them down. The news reached Admiral Song Hae-jin while he was coordinating the siege of the Vorthak home system, and for a moment he stood perfectly still, staring at the tactical display that showed the biological weapon dispersal pattern over Nu Sol, colony where 2,300,000 human civilians had died in screaming agony, including children who had never done anything worse than play In alien dirt, Supreme Overlord Krextar's message broadcast across the galaxy on every available communication frequency showed the Vorthak leader standing over images of human corpses, while his translator rendered his words with savage satisfaction. Let this be a lesson to all species who think they can defy the natural order because humans bleed and die just like any other weak creatures. Song Hae-jin felt something inside his chest turn to ice, and when he looked around his command bridge, he saw the same cold fury reflected in every human face because the galaxy had just made the worst mistake in its history, all units. He said into his communication system, and his voice carried across human space to every ship and station and base. New orders effective immediately, and the enemy has chosen to target our children, so mercy is now extinct. The change in human warfare was immediate and absolute, because every restraint that had kept alien casualties to a minimum vanished like morning mist. And suddenly, the galaxy discovered what total war actually meant when conducted by a species that had mastered every aspect of destruction. Colonel Park Woo-jin commanded the planetary siege divisions, and his ships began systematically dismantling alien military infrastructure with methods that redefined the concept of thorough Vorthak. Military installations did not just get destroyed. They were reduced to their component atoms, and those atoms were then converted into energy and dispersed across space, so that nothing remained to show they had ever existed. Government buildings that had housed alien leadership for centuries became empty spaces where not even dust remained, while weapons factories and military academies simply ceased to exist, as if they had been edited out of reality. The Nexari collective watched in growing horror as their crystal cities were methodically deconstructed at the molecular level, while their hive mind network received detailed explanations of exactly why each structure was being eliminated. Captain Lee Mi-young led the humanitarian protection forces, and her job was to ensure that alien civilian populations remained completely safe, while their military capabilities were systematically eliminated. Her teams used force fields and quantum barriers to shield alien cities from any possible collateral damage, while human weapons vaporized military targets with precision that seemed impossible to alien observers. Children playing in alien streets found themselves surrounded by shimmering human shield generators that protected them from their own government's military actions, while those same children watched their species' weapons of war dissolve into nothing. The Zephyrian swarms tried to hide their military assets inside civilian hive complexes, but human sensors could identify individual insects carrying weapons while leaving every worker and larvae completely untouched. Alien families watched through their windows as human soldiers walked through their neighborhoods targeting only combatants with weapons that somehow knew the difference between a warrior and a baker. General Cho Kyung-soo received reports from across the galaxy as human forces demonstrated their ability to wage war with surgical precision that left civilian populations not just unharmed but actually safer than they had been before the fighting started. The Mollusk Confederacy attempted to use their regenerating bioships as mobile command centers hidden among refugee fleets, but human forces simply extracted the military personnel while leaving the refugees under the protection of human medical teams. When the Etherian energy beings tried to hide their war leaders inside civilian power grids, human specialists isolated the combatants without interrupting electrical service to alien homes and schools. The ancient Titans brought their world ships into battle, hoping that vessels the size of planets could not be attacked without massive civilian casualties. But they discovered that human weapons could remove specific sections of a world ship while leaving the civilian areas completely intact. Alien commanders found themselves captured and detained in comfortable facilities, while their families received food packages and medical care from the same human forces that had just eliminated their military capabilities. The Nexari collective attempted to hide their core worlds behind artificial black holes, but General Cho's response was to demonstrate that humanity had mastered technology that manipulated the fundamental forces of the universe. Human ships simply stepped around the black holes as if they were walking around puddles, while Cho's engineers broadcast detailed lectures about space-time manipulation. To confused Nexari scientists, the crystalline beings watched their military installations vanish one by one, while their civilian crystal gardens remained untouched, and their children continued to play in quantum playgrounds that human force fields kept perfectly safe. Within 6 months, every major alien military force in the galaxy had been completely eliminated, while not a single civilian casualty had been recorded in any human operation. The Vorthak hegemony found itself with no weapons, no military ships, no soldiers, and no means of projecting power beyond their home system. While their civilian population enjoyed better medical care and more abundant food than they had ever experienced. Supreme Overlord Krextar himself was captured during the final assault on the Vorthak command center and found himself in a comfortable detention cell where human doctors treated his battle wounds while explaining exactly why targeting human children had been such a catastrophic mistake. The Zephyrian swarms discovered that their entire warrior caste had been removed from their society, while their worker populations thrived under human protection and guidance. Every alien species that had participated in military actions against humanity found themselves disarmed and helpless. While their civilian populations prospered under human administration, Admiral Songhai Jin stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at what had once been the most heavily defended star system in Vorthak space, and now contained nothing but civilian habitats surrounded by human protection fields. "The galaxy chose to murder our children," he said to his staff. "So we have removed their ability to murder anyone ever again, but we have done it without becoming murderers ourselves." Captain Li Mi-young reported casualty figures that stunned even human military analysts. Because in 6 months of total warfare against every major alien military force, humanity had eliminated billions of enemy combatants while recording exactly 0 civilian deaths. The precision of human military operations had reached levels that seemed impossible even to human observers, who watched enemy soldiers get captured and medically treated while standing next to alien civilians who never realized a battle was taking place. The message that General Cho broadcast to every surviving alien government was simple and final. "You chose to target our innocent people, so we have removed your ability to target anyone, but we have done this while protecting your innocent people because that is what separates us from you." The galaxy discovered that human mercy was not weakness, but a conscious choice made by beings who possessed the power to destroy everything, but chose instead to protect everything worth protecting. When that mercy was withdrawn, it was replaced not by cruelty but by perfect justice, administered with precision that left no room for error or collateral damage. The final image broadcast across the galaxy showed human soldiers distributing food and medicine to alien children, while in the background the smoking remains of military installations served as reminders of what happened to those who threatened human families. Humanity had demonstrated that they could wage total war with perfect efficiency while maintaining perfect morality, and the galaxy would never forget the lesson. Every alien species now understood that humans had not been holding back their technology or their military might, but their willingness to use those capabilities, and that willingness had been earned through the blood of human children who would never play in alien dirt again. Marshal Bai Seung-ho commanded the largest military fleet in galactic history from his flagship Indomitable Spirit, and he watched through quantum displays as human forces systematically dismantled alien military power across 1,000 different star systems with precision that made art look clumsy. The galaxy was learning that humans did not just fight wars, they redefined what warfare meant, and every engagement demonstrated capabilities that alien military theorists had thought impossible. Lieutenant Colonel Lim Sora led her special operations teams through quantum teleportation jumps that deposited them directly inside enemy command vessels, where they used neural disruptors to render entire bridge crews unconscious in seconds without firing a single shot. Her teams moved through alien ships like ghosts passing through walls, and by the time enemy fleets realized they had been boarded, their own commanders were broadcasting surrender orders while sitting peacefully in human detention cells. The Vorthak tried to counter these boarding actions by filling their ships with poisonous gases that would kill any intruder. But Lim's soldiers wore environmental suits that could function in hard vacuum, and their neural disruptors worked through any atmosphere. Captain Kang Do-hyun specialized in psychological warfare, and he had spent decades studying the deepest fears and cultural weaknesses of every alien species until he knew exactly which buttons to push to make entire enemy fleets lose the will to fight. His broadcast to Zephyrian swarms included specific pheromone patterns that triggered their instinctive submission responses, while his messages to Etherian formations used harmonic frequencies that disrupted their energy-based nervous systems. The crystalline Nexari collective discovered that Kang could speak directly to their hive mind, using quantum resonance patterns that made his words feel like they were coming from inside their own shared consciousness. When the Mollusk Confederacy sent their bioships against human positions, they found themselves receiving detailed technical specifications about their own vessel's biological weaknesses, along with polite suggestions about how they might want to surrender. Before those weaknesses were exploited, Major Huang Jiwu commanded cyber warfare operations from a quantum computer core that existed partially outside normal spacetime, which allowed his systems to process information faster than the laws of physics should have permitted. His digital infiltration of alien networks was so complete that enemy commanders often discovered their own tactical computers were giving them advice about how to surrender most efficiently. The Nexari collective had always prided itself on having the most advanced hive mind in the galaxy, with millions of individual consciousnesses linked together in perfect harmony. But Huang's systems learned to think like Nexari better than actual Nexari could, within hours of any engagement with human forces. Nexari fleet commanders would find their own ships refusing to obey their orders, while helpful human voices explained exactly why resistance was futile. The ancient Titans brought their world ships into battle, confident that vessels the size of small planets could not be defeated by anything as small as human dreadnoughts. But they had not accounted for human mastery of dimensional warfare. Human ships did not just attack from 3 dimensions, they struck from angles that existed in mathematical spaces that most species could not even comprehend. And Titan defenses designed to stop conventional attacks were useless against weapons that approached from impossible directions. When the gaseous Etherians attempted to phase through human ships, they discovered that humanity had learned to build hulls that existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, which meant that intruders found themselves trapped between realities. The energy beings of the Spiral Nebula tried to overwhelm human sensors by existing as pure electromagnetic radiation, but human detection systems had been designed to track targets that moved at light speed through 11 different dimensional planes. Admiral Song Heijin coordinated the siege of 47 different star systems simultaneously, while his tactical officers managed orbital bombardments that could remove specific buildings from planetary surfaces without disturbing the grass growing next to them. The precision of human weapon systems had reached levels that seemed almost magical to alien observers, who watched military installations vanish while civilian structures remained completely untouched when the Vorthak hegemony attempted to use their own civilian populations as human shields. They discovered that human targeting systems could distinguish between combatants and non-combatants with perfect accuracy, even in the most chaotic battlefield conditions. Human soldiers could fire weapons through crowds of alien civilians and hit only the enemy combatants hiding among them, while leaving every innocent bystander completely unharmed. The Zephyrian swarms tried to hide their military formations inside refugee convoys, but human sensors could identify individual insects carrying weapons while ignoring those who posed no threat. General Cho Kyung-soo demonstrated human mastery over space and time itself when the Nexari collective attempted to protect their core worlds. By surrounding them with artificial black holes, human ships simply stepped around the gravitational barriers as if they did not exist, while Cho's engineers explained to confused Nexari scientists exactly how humanity had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. The battle for the Nexari home system lasted less than 6 hours and ended with every military installation in the system reduced to component atoms, while the civilian population remained completely unaware that a battle had even taken place. Commander Kim Tae-sung revealed that his exploration fleets had actually been reconnaissance forces, mapping every alien military installation in the galaxy for over a century, and now human forces struck targets with surgical precision that eliminated threats before enemy commanders even knew they were under attack. The Mollusk Confederacy attempted to counter human intelligence gathering by using bioships that could regenerate and evolve, but they discovered that human nanomachines evolved faster than biological systems and turned their own adaptive abilities against them. When the Etherians tried to hide their military assets in parallel dimensions, human forces followed them into spaces that existed between normal reality and nightmare, where the laws of physics were more like suggestions. Even the legendary void dancers who existed partially outside normal spacetime found themselves outmaneuvered by human vessels that could dance through dimensions like performers moving through water. The final phase of human military dominance came when Marshall Bay demonstrated that humanity had not just prepared for war against the known alien species, but had developed contingency plans for threats that did not yet exist. His forces deployed weapons and defenses that countered military tactics that no current alien species used, but which human strategic planners had theorized might be developed in the future. When desperate alien alliances tried to combine their remaining forces into massive armadas, they discovered that human fleet coordination was so advanced that single human commanders could manage more ships more effectively than entire alien command hierarchies. The largest combined alien fleet in galactic history consisted of over 1 million vessels from 8 different species working together in what should have been perfect coordination. They were defeated by 50,000 human ships in a battle that lasted exactly 17 minutes and resulted in 0 human casualties while the alien armada was completely destroyed. The galaxy learned that human warfare was not about destruction, but about demonstrating absolute dominance through overwhelming technological and tactical superiority. Every engagement ended with alien military forces neutralized and their crews captured unharmed, while their equipment was converted into raw materials that humans could use for more constructive purposes. The message was clear to every surviving alien military leader throughout the galaxy that resistance was not just futile, but completely pointless, because humans had mastered every aspect of warfare to a degree that made victory for anyone else mathematically impossible. Marshall Bay's final communication to all alien governments was simple and direct. Humanity tried for 150 years to avoid this outcome, but you chose war instead of cooperation. So now you know what humans are capable of when we stop holding back, and we hope you have learned wisdom from this demonstration. Deep in the dark spaces beyond Pluto where no alien had ever bothered to look carefully, massive structures began to move for the first time in decades, and what the galaxy had always assumed were asteroid mining operations suddenly revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous. General Yoon Jae-min stood on the bridge of a command station that was larger than most cities watching, as hundreds of thousands of displays came online, showing him fleets that had been hidden in plain sight for over a century, and he felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders because humanity was about to show the galaxy what they really were. The first ships to emerge from their hiding places were sleek and dark and moved through space like hunting sharks, and they had been waiting so long for this moment that their crews felt like prisoners finally being released from chains they had worn their whole lives. Captain Oh Min-seok commanded the reconnaissance division from his flagship, and he watched through quantum sensors as the Vorthak fleet approached New Busan Colony, expecting to find farmers and miners defended by a few patrol ships. But instead, they would find something that would rewrite everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. The Vorthak came in force with 50,000 ships because they wanted to make an example of humanity and show the galaxy what happened to species that refused to obey the Council's orders, and Supreme Overlord Krextar himself led the fleet because he wanted to personally oversee the destruction of human defiance. New Busan was a quiet world where humans grew food and raised children and built small cities under alien skies, and the colonists there had always known this day might come, but they also knew they were not as defenseless as they appeared to be. When the Vorthak fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel expecting to see a helpless human colony, they instead found empty space around the planet. And for a moment Krextar wondered if the humans had somehow evacuated their entire population in the few hours since the council meeting. Then Captain Oh Min-seok's ships decloaked all around them, like ghosts becoming real, and the Vorthak discovered that 300 human vessels had been hiding in normal space using technology that made them completely invisible to every sensor system the galaxy had ever developed. The human ships were smaller than Vorthak dreadnoughts, but they moved with impossible grace and precision, like they were controlled by a single mind that could predict every move their enemies would make before those enemies even knew they were going to make them. Oh Min-seok opened communications to the Vorthak fleet, and his voice was calm and professional. Attention Vorthak vessels, you are in violation of human space and are ordered to withdraw immediately or face the consequences of your actions. Overlord Krextar's response came as a roar of rage that his translators could barely handle. You dare threaten us with your pathetic toy ships, human, when we have 50,000 vessels, and you have barely 300. Numbers are not everything, Minsiok replied. And you are about to learn why humanity tried to warn you not to push us this far. The battle that followed lasted exactly 4 hours and 12 minutes, and when it was over, 50,000 Vorthak ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated gas. While not a single human vessel showed even minor damage, Dr. Shin Yun-young watched the engagement from her laboratory, deep inside Earth's moon, where she had spent decades developing weapon systems that the galaxy would have called impossible if they had known such things existed. Human plasma cannons did not just destroy enemy ships. They converted matter directly into pure energy, leaving nothing behind but light and heat, and the screams of Vorthak warriors who had seconds to realize they were facing technology beyond their comprehension. The missile systems that human ships carried used quantum entanglement to strike targets across multiple light-years simultaneously, which meant that Vorthak vessels trying to escape at faster than light speeds found themselves destroyed before they could even begin their jump to safety. Most terrifying of all were the human defense shields that did not absorb incoming energy attacks, but reflected them back at the attackers with triple the original power, which meant that every shot the Vorthak fired only made the human ships more dangerous. Commander Na Young-ho led his dreadnought squadron against the Nexari core worlds, and his flagship Soul's Vengeance was larger than most space stations, and carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. But size was not what made it deadly. The Nexari Collective tried to use their famous hive mind coordination to control millions of ships as a single organism. But Major Huang Jiwu's cyber warfare specialist had spent decades learning how their quantum consciousness network operated. Within minutes of engaging the Nexari fleet, Huang's teams had hacked directly into the Collective's shared mind, and suddenly, human operators were controlling Nexari ships better than their original crews could manage. The crystalline beings found their own vessels turning their weapons on each other, while human voices spoke through their communication systems, telling them exactly how outmatched they were. Your hive mind was an interesting challenge, Huang transmitted to the surviving Nexari commanders. But human artificial intelligence systems learned to think like your species decades ago, and now we can be you better than you can. Across the galaxy, alien communication networks exploded with panic as word spread that humanity had not just been hiding a few extra ships, but had concealed military technology that made them effectively invincible against anything the other species could. Field General Yoon Jae-min received reports from battlefields across dozens of star systems, and every single engagement ended the same way, with complete human victory and 0 human casualties. The insectoid Zephyrians tried to swarm human positions with millions of small fast attack craft, but human point defense systems destroyed incoming targets so quickly that space around human ships looked like it was filled with brief sparks of light. The gaseous Etherians attempted to use their ability to phase through solid matter to infiltrate human vessels, but they discovered that humanity had developed shields that worked in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Even the ancient titans who had ruled the galaxy before any of the current species evolved brought their massive world ships into battle, only to watch human fighters dance around their weapons like gnats avoiding the swipes of a giant. Every alien species had some advantage they had relied on for millennia, and every single one discovered that humans had not only studied their abilities, but had developed specific countermeasures that turned their greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. The Mollusk Confederacy's famous regenerating bioships found themselves infected with human nanomachines that prevented their healing, while the energy beings of the Spiral Nebula discovered that human weapons could disrupt their plasma forms on a quantum level. Captain Lee Dae-ho returned to Earth after the council meeting and found Admiral Choi Hyeri waiting for him in the command center with a smile that was both sad and proud. "How long before they realize the full scope of what we've been hiding?" Lee asked as he watched displays showing human fleets emerging from concealment throughout the galaxy. "Based on our psychological profiles of each species, I estimate about 72 hours before complete panic sets in," Choi replied, "and then they will either surrender unconditionally or try one last desperate gambit that will only make things worse for them." Lee nodded and looked at the tactical displays showing human ships systematically dismantling the military forces of every species that had ever looked down on humanity. 150 years of preparation, he said quietly. 150 years of warnings ignored, and now they get to see what happens when humans stop being nice. The galaxy had always assumed that Earth's exploration fleets were exactly what they appeared to be, but in reality, every human ship that had ever left the solar system had been gathering intelligence about alien military capabilities, while human scientists worked to develop counters for every weapon and defense system they encountered. Humanity had not been exploring the galaxy, they had been preparing to conquer it, and they had done such a thorough job that when the time came for war, the outcome was never really in doubt. The final message that General Yoon sent to all remaining alien military commanders was simple and direct. Humanity offered you peace and cooperation, and you chose war instead. So now you will have war, but it will be conducted entirely on our terms, and you will discover that we are very good at war when we choose to be. The massive space station called Concordia Prime hung in the dark between two dying stars like a metal mountain floating in nothing, and inside its largest meeting hall, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a circle of blue light arguing about humans again. Captain Lee Dae-ho stood in the center of that circle wearing his simple gray uniform, while 12 different alien species stared down at him with eyes that glowed and clicked and buzzed with annoyance, because humans had once again refused to do what they were told, and Lee could feel their anger pressing against him like heat from a fire. But he kept his face calm and his hands steady behind his back. The Vorthak delegation took up almost half the circle with their massive, reptilian bodies covered in dark scales that reflected the blue light like black mirrors, and their leader, Supreme Overlord Krextar, was the size of a small building with teeth like swords and claws that could tear through steel. And when he spoke, his voice came through the translator as a deep rumble that made the floor vibrate under everyone's feet. Human, Krextar said, and the word dripped with disgust. Your species has been part of this Federation for 150 years, and in all that time you have contributed nothing but problems and complaints, and now you dare refuse a direct order from this council. Dr. Park Soo-jin sat in the human observation area watching her old friend Lee stand alone against the most powerful beings in known space, and she knew things that would make these aliens wet themselves with fear if they ever found out. But for now, she just watched and waited like she had been doing for decades. The crystalline Nexari collective spoke next through their hive mind translator, and their voice sounded like wind chimes made of ice. The human species controls exactly 47 star systems compared to our 3,000 and the Vorthak's 2,500, yet they act as if they have equal standing in this council when they are clearly the weakest member species. Commander Kim Tae-sung shifted in his seat next to Dr. Park, and his hand moved unconsciously toward the communication device hidden in his jacket because he knew that one word from Lee would start something the galaxy was not ready for. And Kim had spent his whole life preparing for this moment, even though he hoped it would never come. Dae-ho looked around the circle at faces that belonged to beings who could destroy planets with their fleets and conquer solar systems before breakfast, and he remembered all the warnings Earth had sent over the years, and all the times they had tried to explain that humanity was not what it seemed. But nobody had listened, because humans looked weak and small and harmless. Honorable council members, Lee said, and his voice carried clearly through the vast hall. Earth has spent 150 years showing restraint, and we have done this not because we are weak but because we hoped that cooperation would work better than the alternative. The insectoid Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their species, and their ambassador's translation came out as a series of sharp chirps. Restraint from what exactly human, because your species has no great fleets and no warrior culture, and your worlds are defended by exploration ships that could not fight their way out of a paper container. Lee felt something cold settle in his chest because he had tried so hard to prevent this moment, and now it was happening anyway, and there would be no going back once the words were spoken. But the galaxy had made its choice, and now humanity would have to make theirs. Admiral Choi Hyeri sat in a command center buried 3 kilometers under the Pacific Ocean on Earth, watching the council meeting through quantum communications. and around her hundreds of officers waited at stations that connected to systems the galaxy did not know existed, and when she saw Lee's expression change, she knew their long wait was almost over. We have limited our military to exploration vessels and restricted our population growth and shared our technologies freely, Lee continued. And we have cautioned you repeatedly that Earth has been holding back, but you continue to treat us like children who need guidance from their betters. The Nexari Collective's crystals flashed with colors that meant amusement. Holding back? What? Human, because we have seen your exploration ships and they carry mining equipment and scientific instruments, not weapons of war, and your entire species could not challenge even our smallest battle group. Overlord Krextar leaned forward until his massive head was only a few meters from Lee and his breath smelled like sulfur and death. Perhaps it is time to remind the humans of their place in this galaxy by taking away some of their precious colonies and giving them to species that know how to use them properly. The vote was quick and unanimous, like Lee knew it would be, because these beings had never learned to see past their own arrogance, and now humanity's 3 outer colonies would be seized and given to the Vorthak, and Nexaria's payment for continued Federation membership. Lee Deho stood perfectly still as the council members congratulated themselves on putting the uppity humans in their place, and he felt something inside him that had been carefully controlled for decades finally break free like a dam bursting under too much pressure. Very well, he said quietly, and his voice carried a tone that made several alien delegates stop their celebrating and look at him with sudden uncertainty. We tried to warn you that there would be consequences, but you chose not to listen. Dr. Park Soo-jin watched Lee reach into his jacket and pull out a small silver device that looked like nothing more than a communication unit, but she knew it was connected to systems that could reach across the galaxy in seconds, and when Lee activated it, she felt her heart start beating faster. Earth has been holding back for 150 years, Lee said, and now his voice carried clearly to every corner of the hall. We have shown you mercy and restraint and cooperation because we hoped you would learn wisdom, but instead you chose to treat us like servants and take our worlds as tribute. The Vorthak delegation began to look annoyed again, but something in Lee's tone made them hesitate, and Overlord Krextar's massive head tilted slightly as if he was sensing something dangerous in the air. You want to see what humanity has been holding back? Lee continued. You want to know why we kept warning you about pushing us too far? Then so be it, because after today there will be no mercy and no second chances and no going back to the way things were. Commander Kim Tae-sung felt his hands shake slightly as Lee spoke the words they had all hoped would never be necessary, but the galaxy had forced their hand, and now the universe was about to learn why humanity had tried so hard to avoid this moment. Lee lifted the silver device to his lips and spoke clearly. Protocol 7 authorization, Deho Alpha 77, execute immediately. And then he closed the device and put it back in his jacket while the alien delegates stared at him in confusion. On Earth, Admiral Choi Hye-Ri heard those words and felt a mixture of sadness and fierce satisfaction as she turned to her command staff. Gentlemen and ladies, 150 years of playing nice just ended, and now the galaxy gets to see what humans really are when we stop holding back. She pressed a series of buttons on her command console, and across the solar system, automated systems that had been waiting in silence for decades suddenly came alive with purpose and power. Wake up the fleet, she said, and her words were transmitted to hidden bases throughout human space where ships that the galaxy had never seen began to move. Lee Deho looked around the council chamber one last time at the faces of beings who thought they ruled the galaxy through strength and fear, and he felt sorry for what was about to happen to them. But they had made their choice when they decided to threaten human colonies. You have been warned, he said simply. What happens next is entirely your responsibility. And then he walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of aliens who had no idea. They had just signed their own defeat.